humanities, the recognition that the printed word is the main medium for knowledge production and distribution. So, from a printed word of a main medium for, say, knowledge transfer or teaching learning, it may also be an online or, say, a digital medium of knowledge production, distribution, and teaching learning. So, by producing and using new applications and techniques, digital humanities make new kinds of teaching and research possible, while at the same time studying and critiquing how these impact the cultural heritage and digital culture. So there would be a progression from an already established culture to a digital culture. So I feel a distinctive feature of digital humanities is its cultivation of a two-way relationship between the humanities and the digital. The field both employs technology in the pursuit of humanities research and subject technology to humanistic questioning and interrogation, often both existing simultaneously. So, a look into the history of uh, digital humanities shows that it descended from the field of humanities computing, whose origins reach back to or dates back to 1940s, 1950s, in the pioneering work of Jesuit scholar Robert Busa, who actually began this work in 1946, and the English professor Miles in the early 1950s. Other scholars also began using mainframe computers to automate tasks, which was definitely providing a much faster processing of information from text, which were either handwritten. In the decades which followed, archaeologists, classicists, historians, literary scholars in various disciplines applied emerging computational methods to transform humanities scholarships. The digital humanities also inherit practices and perspectives developed through many artistic, theoretical engagements with electronic screen culture beginning the late 1960s and 1970s. These range from research developed by organizations such as SIGGRAPH to creations by artists such as Charles and Ray and members of EAT, that is, Experiments in Arts and Technology. The AIMS and EAT explored nascent computer culture and intermediality in creative works, technological innovations with art. It was a beautiful amalgamation of technological endeavor. The terminological change from humanities computing to digital humanities has been attributed to John Unsworth Suji, a companion to digital humanities. This has been, the credit goes to our very dear Professor Jesse, tried to prevent the field from being viewed as mere digitalization. So even we, all of you, I am not from this specific field. So all of you should also try to see that English and humanities broadly should not use of online technical tools should not only be viewed as mere digitalization. It should be online and technological platform. So consequently, the hybrid term has created an overlap between fields like which essentially use the methods of contemporary humanities in the study of the term digital humanities as the first necessary thing in a long time, as the digital human and newfound care reflexive. In the aftermath of 2011 Modern Language Association Convention, many members of the field engaged in a public debate about what it means to be a digital humanist. The debate was sparked who is in and who is out. Having been asked, delivering with a mock serious pretension. The pronouncement that yes, there are some fulfilled before calling oneself a digital humanist. Digital humanist is not some airy lyceum. It is a series of concrete instantiation involving money, students, little schools, programs, curricula. He softened his stance, moving from coding as a membership requirement to the less specific building. But he still noted that the fundamental commonality that can be found among digital humanists involves moving from in India in the last leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Narendra Modi, digital humanities. In fact, digital transformation, not necessarily only in humanities, but in cultural studies, design, and cultural heritage, to just name a few. While these have been managed to initiate interest in digital humanities, there is still a lack of consensus on what exactly constitutes these fields of digital humanities in India, as questions around definition, ontology, and method still remain. I hope the scholars from India and abroad participating in this international conference will deliberate during this 2 days conference. They would also discuss various aspects of digital humanities in India and will prove to be pioneers in the field of digital humanities in India. I think all the participants after these 2 days of deliberations and discourse would have very, very valuable takeaways home and will be active differences wherever they are working. So I congratulate the college for organizing such a meaningful conference, and I wish all the very best to each and everyone. Not only I again thank each one of you, and especially to Professor Jaisinji, our dear Professor Jaisinji, for inviting me for the conference, though I would still not know if I am the right person who could have been invited for this conference. And thank you for such a lovely introduction. Thank you, lovely ladies. Thanks a lot.
Much for joining us today, despite enlightening us on the significance and thematic relevance of digital humanities and the need for a seamless amalgamation of both digital tools and humanistic values. Thank you, ma'am. So, before winding up this inaugural session, may I invite Dr. Minnie M. Abraham, the convener of this conference, for the vote of thanks.
So thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks for giving us with your insight.
I can't hear you. I can't hear.
Yes, sir. Ma'am said you're not audible. Am I audible? Father Abraham Oliapurath, Assistant Director, Father Binto Kilikan, Head of our Principal, Dr. Shaini Palati, Head of the Department, Ms. Lissy Kachipalli, my co-convener, Tara Gangadharan, my members of the department, English department, college, all the participants, all the delegates, and paper presenters. And a special hello to Dr. Jai Singh, of a very, very efficient co-organizer of this conference. I'm extremely glad to address you all today on behalf of Bharat Mata College, Trikakara. We are living in times of cyber technology and the pervasive use of artificial intelligence in our everyday life. The overt and covert prevalence of artificial intelligence problematizes our very existence in ways that have not yet been foreseen or analyzed properly. The ramifications of technology are manifested in the altered cultural fabric of the society and the new value systems being generated by them as a continuum. Now, let me move on to the duty that has been officially assigned to me. May I first thank our manager, Reverend Father Abraham Oliapurath, who has been a constant source of encouragement for the department and the college. Dr. Shaini Palati, our principal, is an extremely dedicated, efficient, and performance-oriented person who has practically changed the face of the college. She has always given special inspiration and encouragement to our department in all our endeavors. Thank you, Shaini Miss, for joining us. Father Binto Kilikan, our assistant manager, has been a constant, vibrant presence in the campus. Thank you, Father, for your support. Our head, Ms. Lissy Kachapalli is the epitome of planning, preparation, execution, and efficiency. Her encouragement, support, and guidance constantly propel the department forward. Lissy, ma'am, thank you. Tara Gangadharan, the main convener of the conference, has been working non-stop for days preparing brochures, schedule, replying to mails, and all the odd jobs that are associated with bringing up a conference to fruition. Thanks, Tara, for your work. And our work will only be over by 30th and by after the publication of the proceedings. Still, the Department of English has been the most vibrant and forward-thinking. Each and every member of the department, may I personally thank you, Joji sir, Sabita, Marin, Tara, Rosemarin, etc. Now, I didn't exactly keep Mamta ma'am for the last. I wanted to kind of, wind up with a flourish or like a crescendo. So I come to you, Mamta ma'am. We have no words to thank you enough for your presence and your wonderful words, ma'am. And you have provided a shot in the arm for humanities, which was possibly being devalued in terms of funds, of choices. As you said that many of the students who were high performing, they sometimes unwillingly choose science instead of humanities. So thank you for pointing that out to us. Thanks for your visionary statements about transformative changes that are brought about by technology and digital platforms. You spoke about multi-layered literacies. You talked about the evolution of human species into new, unpredictable post-human forms, which we don't know how it's going to turn out. You spoke about the amalgamation of art and technology. You spoke about the significance of the field of humanities and technology. You spoke about the new ways, transdisciplinary methods of scholarship, etc. And you have spoken about digital humanities making new kinds of learning and research possible and giving rise to a new digital culture, which will be different from the current fabric of culture, which is prevalent. Let us hope that humanities will engage with more ethics and eroded slowly by the over prevalence of technology, play an important role in bringing the values back. Thank you, ma'am, once again for thanks very much. And I hope the keynotes which are going to be there. I hope that the keynotes, papers, the interactions, deliberations, all of which are going to take place in the coming 3 days in this online interdisciplinary conference, it will shed light on all the areas which, ma'am, you have mentioned and which the speakers before me have mentioned. And every single participant and resource person, I hope, will return from here with a better understanding and interpretation of the socio-cultural life as a major takeaway from this, getting more insight into better modes of engagement and while being enlightened by this conference. So thank you, Mamta ma'am, once again, and thank you one and all. And let's look forward to a fruitful conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. All of you have a very, very good day and have a very meaningful conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So our inaugural session is concluded, and for the next session, it's over to Dr. Jai Singh sir. So please.
Jay sir will be presenting a paper, so I think we'll directly move on to Jay sir, so that you can present the paper, sir. We know that our next our first keynote session will be at 12:30 p.m. So Jay sir will be presenting a paper right now. Over to you, Jay sir. Oh.
Yeah. Just 1 minute. I'm sending email, link to our international speaker. Yeah, ma'am. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So today I'm going to speak about cyborg minds at play, understanding post-human futures. Now, as one of the most intelligent species on this earth, we live under some kind of illusion that only we are endowed with consciousness. But we are not the only species on this earth who are endowed with consciousness. There are many directly associated.
May I interrupt you, sir? You're not audible properly. I'm interrupting because you're not audible, sir.
The transfer of consciousness from human mind to a machine. Yeah, ma'am, I think there is some little bit on all sides. Uh, Ma'am, hello. Yeah, I can do one thing. I can take just 5 minutes break, and I can restart the entire system. Let us see if it works. Just 5 minutes. Nobody should leave the meeting. You will rejoin the meeting automatically. Yeah, just 5 minutes. Ma'am, I'm audible to all of you now.
There's a there is a disturbance. It's not clear. And sir, some people are trying to join also. Let me just check.
Ma'am, right now there are no people who are trying to join. So can you hear me right now?
This is better, sir.
So what you suggest right now, ma'am? What shall we do? Shall we? इसमें जरा इसका वॉल्यूम कम करके लाओ. Yes, ma'am. I think ma'am, if I am audible to you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay, then I can start my paper, and by that time keynote will speaker will join, and then we will continue. Yeah, there is some problem, but I think there won't be any problem in the recording, because in the recording it will come very clear. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to speak on cyborg minds at play, understanding post-human future. Back in 1872, potato in a dark cellar has a certain no. We see the light coming from crawling state. They will crawl up the wall and out of the cellar window. If there be a little earth anywhere on the journey, he will find it and use it for its own ends. So this narrative from clearly shows that even the vegetative life, even the plants do have What is consciousness if it is not consciousness? We think potato does not have consciousness, but from this example, if this is not consciousness, then what is consciousness? If it be asked from the action of the potato, if we say, okay, somebody may explain it, in a potato some chemical reaction happens. If it be asked that the action of the potato is chemical and mechanical only, then that is due to the chemical and mechanical effects of light and heat, the answer would seem to lie in an inquiry chemical and mechanical units of pressure. Then human mind also works chemical reactions. Whether those things which we deem most purely spiritual are anything but disturbances of equilibrium in an infinite series of levers, beginning with doroscopic detection and going up to the human arm and appliances which make use of it. Whether there be molecular action of thought, whence a dynamical theory of the passions shall be deducible. Whether strictly speaking, we should not ask what kind of levers a man is made of, rather than what is that temperament. How are they balanced? How much of such and such will it take to weigh them down so as to make him so and so? Now, when we look into the history of human understanding of the consciousness and brain, for a long, long time, human beings were not aware of the organ which is known as brain. They used to believe that the entire thinking, even now, people say, I am telling you from the heart, I am thinking you from the core of my heart, despite the fact that heart is nothing more than a pump which pumps the. So in the 5th century, Alcmaeon of Crotona, and in the 4th century, Hippocrates. These are the two first scientists who recognized that brain is despite it took more than 2 millennia believed that intelligence resided in the heart. Even today we say was learned by heart. The latest estimates put the total number of cells. Now, when we talk about the structure of the brain, in a brain, the latest estimate put that total number of cells in an average human body is 37 trillion, and the total number of cells in the human brain and the total number of cells in the human brain is roughly 86 million are in the brain. However, these cells are at the center of who we are. They define our mind, and when they go, they take with them our memory and our personality and our very essence. Suppose if something happens with the brain, the personality is gone, the memory is gone, everything is gone. The person is turned into a vegetative body. Anyone asked to define the meaning of the word mind more exactly will soon is very slippery. Now there are two things. Brain is the hardware, and mind accepted definition of mind is an emergent property. Then what is the your brain's behavior that provides humans a set of cognitive faculties, which include intelligence, consciousness, free will, reasoning, emotions. We may discuss whether the other higher animals, such as dogs and monkeys, have minds of their own, and we may be willing to concede that they do, but their minds are different from us and somewhat inferior to our own minds. Now the question is the mind and the brain. Brain is the hardware and mind is the software, and only human beings believe that it is believed that only human beings have mind. Mind means we have the reasoning power. We can devise new ways to solve an existing problem. I give you one example. Even other beings, they do have mind, but their memories are short-lived. They are unable to transfer the memories to the coming generation. This is the only difference. This is the biggest difference between human beings and other species residing on this earth. Human beings can transfer their memory from brain to text when we write a book, and we store in a library. You go to a library is a big brain, the storehouse of all the brains that existed before us. And now we can transfer our memory to pen drive or hard disk. And little bit of intelligence is also there in the transferred to the machine. That is the post-human future. But the intelligence is found even in uh, other creatures as well. It's not that only human beings have the intelligence. The only difference is the other creatures cannot transfer their intelligence to other species. Whatever they have discovered just dies with them only, not transferred to other species. Perhaps the most defining characteristic of mind is that it provides its owner with consciousness and with all grant that a program running in a computer can reason, can perform elaborate mathematical computations, can play chess better in the video games, can translate speech, and can even drive vehicles. But we would ability it is self-conscious. This is another difference between human beings and machines, computers, artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence up to now is not self-conscious in the proper definition of self-consciousness. Self-conscious, like Google Assistant. Now you have booked a ticket using your Google Gmail ID, and you get a message not from the airlines but from your, and you should leave right now, like this. But I think somewhere behind all these technologies, human mind is there. Up to now, the artificial intelligence is not able to exist irrespective of human beings. So it's not yet self-conscious. We tend to view consciousness in this sense as a thing reserved for humans, even though we cannot pinpoint exactly what it is and where it comes from. Thousands of brilliant thinkers have tackled this problem, but the solution remains elusive. Experience has made us familiar with only one very particular type of mind, the human mind. This makes it hard to imagine or to think about other types of minds. We may, of course, imagine the existence of computer programs that behave and interact with the outside world exactly as human brain would, and we may be willing to concede that such a program may have a mind. However, such a program does not yet exist, and therefore the gap separating humans from machines is still wide. Many thinkers, philosophers, and writers have addressed the question of whether a non-human mind can emerge from the workings of a program running in computer. This is the biggest danger, and you might have watched so many science fiction movies, TV series, even video games, where the machines regain consciousness and they start looking at human beings as their enemies. And the first thing they do is they start killing human beings. A program running in a computer means this is a fear that uh, program running in computer can start thinking independently of human beings in a network computer or in some kind of computation sport. But until now, we have a more solid definition of what a mind is. We will not be able to develop a test that will be able to recognize whether a given system has a mind of its own, especially if the system has mind very different from human mind we are familiar with. But still, as far as the existing definitions of mind are concerned, the machines, the artificial intelligence or whatever you call it, still not a match to human mind because it is not yet self-conscious. Between technology. For example, Play in his novel Iriwan in 1872. He wrote long time back, but it's not that human beings and machines are interacting for the first time. Samuel Butler in his Iriwan in 1872 pointed out that human beings and machines are integrated. Human beings are machines and machines are alive. So it's very difficult to differentiate between where the human world ends and where the mechanical world. From Irivon, man's very soul is due to the machines. It is a machine-made thing. He thinks as he thinks and feels as he feels through the work that machines have brought upon him, and their existence is quite as much a sine qua non for this as is for theirs. Those thrive best who use machinery wherever its use is possible with profit. But there is the art of the machines. This is the art of the machines. They serve that they may rule. They bear no malice towards man for destroying a whole race of them, provided he creates a better instead. On the contrary, they reward him liberally for having hastened their development. It is for neglecting them that he incurs their wrath, or for using inferior machines, or for not making sufficient exertions to invent new ones, or for destroying them without replacing them. And here, Samuel Butler also brings in one more idea. He says that machines do breed like human beings. It's not that only the living beings breed, even the machines breed. If a fan, now it's a very difficult thing to believe that a fan or a washing machine can breed. Yes, they do breed, but they do not breed like other human beings. He compares machines with viruses. Now we are living in the COVID situation, and I'm talking about viruses. So virus is a non-living thing when it is in outside the cell, outside the living world. If suppose it is in the air or somewhere, it is a non-living thing. The moment it enters the cell, it is a living thing. The same way, the fan, when it is outside, hanging in the ceiling of our house, it is a non-living thing and it cannot breathe. Then where the fan breathes? It breeds in the mind of the engineer. It lives there, it breeds there, it mutates there, and new species of fan are born in the minds of millions of engineers around the world. Now the fan becomes table fan, from table fan it becomes air conditioner, then smart air conditioner, cooler, all kind of varieties are born in the minds of the scientists, engineers. So the human brain, human mind is a fertile ground for the technology's breeding. This is what Samuel Butler says in his Reward. Samuel firmly believed that human beings use machines, which in turn also interact and use human beings. Around this time, scholars seriously started thinking of some divine inspiration rather they are materialistic products like any other product. And in 1890, Hugo Munterberg established psychology lab at Harvard University, and it was before that it was being created only by the human beings who are divinely inspired. But from this time onwards, that idea was shattered for once and all that human beings are divinely inspired. By the first decade of 20th century, the mechanical aspect of human life as well as literature became apparent. Swana Rose, in her introduction to Reading Modernism with Machines, Digital Humanities and Modernist Literature, says in the 1922 Constructivist Manifesto of Laszlo Moholy-Nagy proclaimed that technology is the reality of the century. In defining technology as the invention, construction, and maintenance of the machines, and proclaiming that to be a user of machine is to be of the spirit of the century, according to Moholy-Nagy, technology is the reality that determines what we can grasp and what we cannot understand. Therefore, computational machines constitute the foundation that determines what emerges as real, as palpable, as capable of producing truth, and what recedes unreal, ungraspable, unprecedented. So everything is decided by the machines, through the machines, with the help of machines. And machines, once they are created, they compel human beings for their use. Towards the middle of the 20th century, they started looking at human beings as machines. Now, when we come towards the end of the 20th century, there are scientists, there are scholars, there are philosophers who just remove the thin line between the mechanical world and the human world, and they say that and they directly started calling human beings as machines. For example, Deleuze and Guattari, in their Anti-Oedipus and A Thousand Plateaus, they propounded this idea of machines. What they say, as man for a machine has man for its part, even if we view them with their machine and integrate them, internalize them in an institutional model at every stage of action, transmission and motoricity. Hence, the social machine fashions a memory without which there would be no synergy of man and his technical machines. According to them, human body includes the brain and psyche. According to them, human body, including the brain and psyche, is a sophisticated machine which is plugged into various other machines. Society also is, and according to them, the social machine. They call the entire society a machine. So, how the entire society is a machine? uh, the society is a machine, the social machine exhibits an immobile motor and undertakes a variety of interventions. Flows are set apart, elements are detached from a chain, and portions of the task to be performed and distributed. Coding and flows imply these operations. This is the social machine's supreme task. In as much as the apportioning of production corresponds to extractions from the chain resulting in a residual share for each member in a global system of desire and destiny that organizes the production of production and the production of recording and the consumption as well. This is how entire human society, educational institutes, markets, family, outer society, everything is a machine which is plugged into other machines. All tasks of this big social machine are encoded and decoded in the form of language, and no execution is possible without this encoding and decoding. Contrary to earlier ages, text is also seen as a machine, which is plugged into numerous machines that further lead to the evolution of text, which look more like machines, that is interactive text and video games. In the words of Derrida, we can call it an anthropocentric computer. Cyber technologies and innovations in the field of artificial intelligence have revolutionized the relationship between the reader and the text, especially when we take text in a wider context. For example, Jacques Derrida in this regard says, a text for strategic reasons is in part a text that is henceforth no longer a finished corpus of thinking, of writing, some content enclosed in a book or its margins, but a differential necessary to something other than itself, to other differential traces. Thus, the text overruns all the limits assigned to it so far, not submerging or drowning them in an undifferentiated homogeneity, but rather making them more complex, dividing and multiplying strokes and lines, all the limits, everything that was to be set up in opposition to writing. And what is opposition to writing? Speech, life, the world, the real, the history, and whatnot. Every field of reference to body or mind, conscious or unconscious, politic or economic, and so forth, is part of text. Now, I come to the interactive text. The interactive texts have all the properties of new media. Now, what are the interactive texts? Like Facebook, they are also interactive texts, and other than that, we have online video games. So, interactive texts have all the properties of new media, and hence, different fonts, different from earlier texts. This difference is quite visible when we compare movies with computer games, drama with internet chat, and print novels versus hypertext. Further, the interactive fiction can include other kinds of text beside purely verbal ones. Some interactive texts include video games as a part of the plot, for instance, Michael Barling's in Cyborg novel includes one or it may require an active participation from the reader in solving the mystery, as it happens in Mark Blank's Deadline, a detective story. In such fictions, the reader literally becomes the protagonist and takes part in the development of the plot. As Anthony at Holland, while discussing Cyborg, say what they say about Cyborg, instead of identifying with the hero, excuse me, I will have to stop for a few minutes. I got a message from Alexandra. Yeah, I will just answer her. Being host, we have to do many things simultaneously. Yeah, I just of whether she has joined or not. I will just conclude my talk in a few minutes so that after that I can concentrate on the my role as a host. Yeah, the biggest fear that people in the departments of literature generally feel is that there is interactive media or techno-realistic texts. It may just wipe out the physical text from the classrooms, and the old timer don't feel comfortable with this very idea of using video games and all that stuff. But these days, many thinkers, many scholars positively about the use of these technologies, and they do not actually see any fear from these technologies. They are not afraid of these technologies. For example, in for example, example, Rusty, he wrote, two novels which are based on video games and all that stuff. And he also discusses the post-human futures in these novels. And while talking about literature and video games and all that, what he says, we may actually have a story instinct, and so there is a legitimate concern about a new form which may erode our attachment to the story. What will that to do us as human beings? So he simply says the story will always be there. The story or the medium, whether it is video game or the text, all that is not a danger. Rather, the danger is the junk story. And he says we should be aware of the junk story. That's okay. Other everything else is okay. One of the things that is interesting about it is a much looser structure of the game and the much greater agency that the player has to choose how he will explore and inhabit the world that is provided for him. And video games, they provide enough space to the participants, to the players to evolve the story. And it's a whether we accept it now or not, but in the coming future there will be more interactions in the more areas which were earlier not invaded by the technology. Those areas will be part of technology. Human beings and cyberspace will interact more closely, more comprehensively, and people will devise new ways to use technology, and the technology will ask you. And now I will check, whether our speaker has joined or not. Yeah, I got a message. I will try. Give me a moment. Yeah, I think in a few minutes he will join. So, ma'am, for the time being, session is over to you. Yeah, she hasn't yet joined. She is trying. I think in a few minutes, she will join. Yes. Good morning, Alexandra. Yeah. So, through your Facebook only. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, no, we can connect through. Dear friends, I think you can hear me. Tara ma'am. Yeah, Tara ma'am, you can hear me. Yeah. She is unable to join it through Zoom. She is trying. If she is unable, then she will use the Facebook, and I will show it on the Zoom. Yeah. Yes. Yes. In 5 minutes, she is joining.
Thank you very, thank you very much for your introduction, and welcome everybody. I'm really sorry for the challenges I face today, but I'm traveling now with my family, and this causes sometimes problems with the internet. However, in contemporary times, digital technologies allow us many possibilities to connect, and I'm so honored to be today here with you. And I would like to talk to you about the importance of rethinking our ethics and values in face of changing technologies, in face of digital technologies that are not only out there, but that are also permitting human bodies and human minds. And this brings about challenges. Challenges not only how to conceptualize the world, but also how to think about oneself. Who is a human? Do we transform ourselves to a different kind of beings? And how to go on in reconfiguring social relations in the small and in a bigger scale. These considerations I am developing since already 5 years, starting from the stipend of the Kościuszko Foundation that I realized in the United States of America in Philadelphia, where I had a pleasure to cooperate with the Professor Joseph Margolis from the one side, and from the other with a post-human research group at New York University, the group managed by Francesca Ferrando, who is also one of the leaders of the Beyond Humanism network, that is encompassing both post-humanism and transhumanism and other kinds of reflections that are going beyond the traditional humanistic reflections. This was the starting point to arrive at the idea that we are undergoing a constant evolution, also biotechnological evolution now, transforming maybe not from humans to cyborgs, I would say, but from human persons to different kinds of persons. I will develop it a bit more broadly, but I would like to show you, this is my dissertation, professor's dissertation, because now I finished my habilitation thesis on the cyborg persons or cells. This is the one that is published as a dissertation at my home university, and you can find it already online, available free, by the new updated and publishing house, and it should be out already this year. What is the main idea that I try? It is not necessary to divide very strongly the word saying, showing different kinds of beings as completely separated. Animals, humans, cyborgs, machines, we are very much used to think about others as either not having soul or just being things. and humans, we are used to elevate a lot. But if we think about this from where it is from the natural world, it is from the animal world in the process of the evolution. Joseph Margolis is not using the word of human, but rather a human person or self. In a similar manner, different kinds of persons or selves that are possible or that also may be possible in the future. Why this kind of thinking? Why changing the human to a human person? Human is a notion very strongly imbued ideologically. And post-humanism, for example, is trying to trespass it, showing that the certain kind of conceptualizing who is a human is very discriminative for the others, is very closed in a way, because it is focused usually on the kind of Vitruvian man, as Rossi Braidotti is saying. We can call it kind of Vitruvian ghost, white, rational men having power. And this thinking about a human in this way brought about a lot of suffering around the world and discrimination of even humans, people, others that are not this way or this form of a human. So then posthumanism is trespassing this what is human, trying to think what might be a post-human. However, here is a small break, because thinking about the human just as this white, rational man possessing power and exerting it over the others, it might be thought as a specific notion of a human in a specific time. But the human existence on the world is much longer, and we should rather, I claim, rethink what does it mean to be a human person, than to get rid of the notion as such. Because then we can also find it in the book by Braidotti that the post-humanists don't know how to define post-human, because the human is too narrow in their understanding. And thinking about human persons allow us to see how the higher primates evolved into human persons due to invention and mastery of language and everything that it entails, because the language brings about the development of the culture, civilization, society. A lot of the whole new world appears with the language, the world of culture, in which we as human persons live our lives, because we are not just dressed up animals within the walls, city walls, but we are cultural beings, not possible to be reduced neither to matter nor to a kind of a spiritual matter, but it is we are in language, in cultural beings. So this small but of great importance change that appeared with the invention of language brought us to the point where we are now. And our evolution cannot be thought as just biological evolution. It is a kind of hybrid evolution of this what is natural and cultural, technological. And these two sides influencing one another. Biological side is influencing the cultural, and the cultural, technological side is influencing the biological and natural. However, some contemporary times are very strongly defined by technology, and this technology is not just outside of us. It is not. There are not just things out there, but they are. We are entering in a very intimate contact also with them, with this technology. We are immersed in it, and we are, in a way, I may say, absorbing it into our bodies, into our minds. Yes, of course, in most of cases, still telephones are in hands, not inside the hands, but this is a process. And we can also think here about kind of extended mind theory, like by Chalmers or Andy Clark, or we can go look to the other side, as J.J. Gibson is talking about affordances, that the environment has got a special qualities that are inviting us to a certain kind of manipulating them, and they are also kind of entering our bodies, these forces. And this technology is also affording us, inviting us to absorb it. Of course, most of people nowadays is not having this kind of technological implants, but there are already a few. Of course, I'm not thinking about this kind of not operating on not just material implants, kind of like hard valves or metal bones or silicone implants or this kind of stuff that are just upgrading or bettering our functioning in order to be normal in a way, to be average human. But I'm thinking about kind of technologies that are strongly changing our modes of operating, functioning as persons. And what I mean here, technologies that are changing our modes of perception, cognition, and communication, because these three ways of functioning are defining us as persons in society. What can it be? I think that it is good always not only to speculate theoretically, but also to try to find examples in the real world. And there are already a few. For example, Neil Harbison and Moon Ribas, two artists, can be considered cyborgs. Is usually called as the first officially acknowledged cyborg because he has got a British passport with the antenna. Yes, he has got an antenna implanted in his brain that allows him to hear colors. He was born with achromatopsia, with a disease that is not allowing him to perceive any colors. He just sees the world in white and black. Then the implant is collecting all the visual data, all the color data, and transforming them to the signal that he hears in his bone conduction. In the way how, like, whales, for example, hear. So, and this antenna also allows him to receive emails, very simple ones, audio emails, rather kind of sounds, and not words, not literally words, but sounds. So it is possible to pass kind of qualities of emotional feeling, of kind of mood. And so this opens the possibility for different kind of perception, different kind of communication with the world and with the surrounding. And this also influences the changes in the cognition, what we think about the world. For example, Neil Harbison can hear not only the regular colors that we as human persons can see, like ultraviolet or infrared. He says that when he is in a room, for example, where is the light near to infrared, and he's there with some people and with a cat, only he and cat reacts to this light that is relatively rare in the world, and people stay neutral, don't notice it, don't pay attention. So in this exact moment, he feels a stronger connection with a cat than with humans. So this shows him kind of an interspecies connection that was not there in place, but that is possible also to be developed. Ultraviolet is also perceived by other animals. This that we as human person cannot perceive it does not mean that it is unexistent in the world. For example, bees can perceive ultraviolet. So this shows kind of new connections, that we didn't notice it before. And Muniribas, his partner in this cyborg activism, has got an implant that is allowing her to feel the movements of the earth. She is connected online with a station measuring the movements of the earth. So she feels all the earthquakes around the earth that are stronger than 1.0 in the Richter scale. And in another elbow, she has recently implanted her another chip that is allowing her to feel the movements of the moon, because she wants to have kind of intergalactical perception. So this is really kind of rare, you may say, or specific, because when she walks around the city, she often stops when the earthquake is very strong somewhere in the world, and she immerses her in the feeling, in the co-feeling with the earth or with the moon. And this direct surrounding of her passes to a certain background. And it happens quite often because earthquakes of 1.0 in the Richter scale are more or less 1 for 10 or 15 minutes. So it is really changing the mode of existence, thinking about the connection with the new possibilities of co-feeling with others, with the outer space, with the earth, with the animals, with the people, and yes, these persons are very interesting as the example, because these implants, although they are changing their modes of perception and communication and cognition, they are subtle, you may say. This is not a Terminator hand or eye or something like this, but they are delicate and subtle. And nobody would dare to say that they are not persons. And of course they are. They have, as I admitted already, Harbison has the passport with the antenna, what is important, because it is not possible to have any technological devices on the photos in passport. But he argued in the court that this antenna is a part of his body or is a part of his brain. So then it is really a kind of example to see how the human person is changing into cyborg person that is evolving out of it. And of course, there is a continuity on the cultural level, where there's a relatively small disruption on a biological level, because the change that occurs here starts with the insertion of the implants inside the bodies, but the implants that are really not just material objects, silicon, metal, and this kind of stuff filling in, but that are changing our modes of operation. And then, really, it is kind of better thinking of possibility of different kinds of embodiments of persons. Persons may be embodied in Homo sapiens bodies, but can be also embodied in bodies that are already technologically transformed. But also, we already know that there are possible different kinds of persons, because persons are on this cultural and legal level not necessarily bound to a Homo sapiens species. And already, for example, in India, in your country, dolphins have been granted the status of non-human persons. A few years ago, similar cases in Argentina, where orangutans were granted this status of non-human persons, and Amazonian forest and river is also non-human person, a legal that can be represented in the court. This may, of course, make us stop and say, okay, but dolphins, orangutans, or Amazon River cannot present their interest in court personally, but have to have some representatives. But to say truth, it is also the case with most of human persons. We need to have representatives that fight for our interest in court, because usually we have got limited abilities to do it. So, of course, here appears one more problem of communication between representative and the represented person. But here also are appearing some kinds of hypothetical possible solutions of this case, although some of them are controversial, like thinking of the upgrading high animals, so in this way that we may communicate better with them. Do animals want to be upgraded, or this would be again something that we would do to them without their will, permission, and not for their good, just understood by us, maybe not in the way as they do understand it. But this is still open for consideration. However, then we see that we can have different kind of persons. We can have higher animals recognized as persons. We can have Homo sapiens individuals recognized as person. We can have corporations or countries also recognized as legal persons in a way. Cyborgs can be recognized as persons. Maybe also hybrids, because genetic engineering is also strongly developing, and merging of human genomes with other genomes is also already possible, although, of course, limited due to ethical reasons. But then, if we think about different kind of persons, differently embodied, we have to think about the necessity of rethinking our morality, our ethics. Because to say truth, I'm not an expert in Eastern thought and so I'm in Western cultural aesthetics, and my interest in non-European contemporary art, I'm opening up to other perspectives, but my own consideration is rooted in ancient Greece and Western thought. It is my tradition, so I'm speaking on behalf of it. Then traditionally, ethics was based on either transcendental standing on the faith in God that gave us the rules, and first the soul, then the rules, and we have to follow them. And these rules referred just to humans, and the soul was supposed also to belong just to humans. Then more modern approaches were also focusing on the human world, and treating others as moral patients at best. That means that not objects, but kind of lower beings that have to be caretaken by agents, by moral agents. It is like in the case of children, they cannot be responsible for all their deeds, but they have to be taken to the moral consideration by moral agents. And in this way, we usually approach animals and the others if we care. But generally, even if we think about human rights, they are not rights of persons. They are based on belonging to Homo sapiens species. So then, if we notice that our world is becoming rich, that is embracing a bigger spectrum of rethink these rights and maybe make them not just human. This is a kind of very anthropocentric view that has to be surpassed. And this is also extremely important in face of climate changes that we experience. That we have to think more about other kind of beings. One more problem that we face here, we think about this morality and ethics. We have to and we want to embrace different kinds of persons, differently embodied. We have to admit that our ethics has no transcendental standing. Then this is something that we do on our way, that it is sittlich, as German terms show. So it means contextualized, conditioned very by history, by society, by the culture. And it is something extremely solid, but something that is open for transformation, for reconfiguration, and that we should think how to change it. This, of course, also gives us more responsibility. It's moral responsibility for building morality, because it is not coming from the outside. This is something that we construe, that we reconstruct, transform, and we should try to make it for better, although always this better will be contingent. It will not be absolute and transcendental. So this is a challenge that we face. If we think about contemporary, it is usually rather it is thinking, trying to surpass anthropocentrism. It is trying to surpass focusing just on human, but it is getting rid of human too easily. From the one side, as I already mentioned, but also from the other, it is slipping already to kind of moral postulates, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. But first of all, I think that we have to rethink also the basis of the ethics and morality, and see that it is not once and for all, not transcendental, but that is, as I mentioned, contextualized, conditioned, historical, social, cultural, and that we thinking about the contemporary transformations of the world, technological, biotechnological transformation of the world, we should also go on in rethinking the ethics, opening the possibility also for different kinds of ethics, maybe not just human ethics, maybe cyborgian ethics, or broader kind of ethics encompassing different kinds of beings. And because the big existential need is to find a kind of a sense in one's life, and find a way. This is something that we really need to do. We have to retell our stories. We have to retell our morality. We have to retell all our world for some contingent better, what I wish for us all. Thank you very much, and I invite you to ask the questions. Yes, please. Thank you very much. Just repeat me one word about what kind of beings there is the question that we can consider them as legal entities. Rivers. Yes. The Amazonian forest, that it has got its own value, its needs, things that are negative for it. So if that possibility, there are different kinds of also argumentations why different kinds of entities can be considered persons. For example, in the case of orangutans or dolphins, it is one of the arguments is on their sensibility, high sensibility, intellectual skills, communicative skills. But in case of river, it is about its complex sensibility, and it's consider them as legal entities. Although it is still a question if we have to have all kinds of legal entities equal, maybe not equal, but the same, because also this is the question. Maybe we don't have to have all kinds of persons the same in order to matter. Maybe we can be really different, still have the equally same rights in some respect, in the case of life and care of one's interests. Thank you very much for this question. This is a very important question, and about the post-human subjectivity and all these interconnections. One of the theories that is working very strongly on this, of course, is Rossi Braidotti, that is talking about post-human subjectivity as nomadic and developing in interconnections. However, then thinking that we are not solid, closed kind of beings, but interconnected and interchanging with all the others, with the technology, with other beings, that we are kinds of knots in all these nets, is very interesting and inspiring view from the ontological perspective, I would say. However, the challenge that is here is the lack of the agent, because the agency becomes distributed. Then we are thinking rather of agency of assemblages, as Jane Bennett is also talking about, for example. But then, if we think that we are nomadic, we are interrelated, that we are not acting as individuals, but we are acting within the assemblages, then we cannot be neither praised nor blamed for our own actions, to say truth, exactly. So here is a kind of also contradiction between ontology and ethics in post-human perspective. However, this challenge has been already noticed in post-human studies. And for example, Catherine Hales addresses it in one of her recent books, Unthought, The Power of Unconscious. And she's talking there about the cognitive assemblages, about this, that there should be recognized a kind of cognitive center within the assemblage, and a human person can be understood as assemblage itself of different kind of species, because our bodies is combined not just of animal cells, but also of parasites, fungi, bacteria, and we are the whole environment with a kind of cognitive center. So, also we are entering into different kinds of assemblages with cognitive centers. And it is the challenge to think the agency within it, about the agent. And I was really very much looking forward to the conference that should be this July on Lesbos of Beyond Humanism Network. But it is focused on the dialogue between post-humanism and in a very ontological sense. But then we are missing this moral and social perspective. And in order to embrace it, we have to have an agent, and we have to find the dialogue between post and transhumanism. Transhumanism, just to add briefly, is a very much post-enlightenment kind of movement, thinking about upgrading this what human already is, while post-humanism is really trying to trespass this traditional human. However, it's not losing kind of agency and identity, but is upgrading it. So this is very interesting and still on its way. Please join us in thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Ladies and gentlemen, I, on behalf of the Department of English, Bharat Mata College, would like to extend a very hearty thanks to our speaker, Dr. Alexandria Lukanshevich-Alcaraz, for sharing her reflections to this broader community. The session was engaging, and you gave us a number of ideas regarding cells, cyborgs, our hybrid and technical evolution, interspecial connections, and the need to reach the unreached, which surely will make a better world a better place to live. And more than that, you have kindled a spark in us to explore more in this area and like for more. And a big thank you to Jay Sir, Dr. Jay Singh, Sir, the co-organizer, for helping us in innumerable ways, and Tara for moderating this session. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to those who have asked questions, joined there on the other side, waiting patiently and impatiently, and for all of you, and to all of you who were there with us. And I hope you would enjoy the upcoming sessions too. Thank you, and have a
Yes, a very good afternoon to all of you to our second plenary session. Without much ado, as we know that Professor Wim van Herbeek had already joined us some time back, speaker, author, and consultant specialist in the organization and management of open innovation, and he's a professor at the Digital Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Surrey Business School, University of Surrey, UK. So welcome, Wim, Professor Wim, to BMC, Parthamada College, Trikakara. And we are extremely delighted to have you here with us today, and very eager to hear from you. Over to you, Professor Wim.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so let me know if there's a technical breakdown. I can share my screen, that's good. Let me see. Can I see my screen board? Yes, okay, let me see. Share. Do you see it now?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I will talk about a relatively new research area which I'm developing these days. I didn't publish anything yet about that, but this will be coming. And it's about digital technologies, which most people are working nowadays in innovation and strategy. But I'm not focusing on operational management, I'm focusing on strategy. So I'm focusing on new business models or new business model innovation. And very specifically, I focus on ecosystem management, which is necessary to develop these business models. So there's a lot of new business models possible, but you only can do it when you work together with partners in an ecosystem. And what I see is that ecosystem management is not well developed yet. So that's my topic for today. But let's start where we, let's see if we can move on. This is not, okay, now we are. So I started, let's say, 15 years ago with open innovation. And for those that don't know open innovation, I will talk about like 3, 4, 5 minutes about open innovation, then move to innovation ecosystems and show the difference. I have some slow, this is going very slow. Let me see if I can do something about that. Okay. So open innovation is basically about using external technology. And let me see if I can put it into, okay. So you have this funnel. This funnel is now becomes like a funnel with holes where you can get external technology, right? You still have the internal technology, which goes, let's say, from internal ideas through development up to a new product. But that's the old closed innovation. Open innovation is basically about you have these internal ideas, you cannot use it for a new product for several reasons, and you're going to license it out, or you're going to spin it out. Eventually, you're going to divest it. And nowadays, you also have this external technology base, which may be university technology or technology in universities, which may be spin-offs, which may be licensing agreements that you have with other companies. And you see this is external technology which you're going to use internally, or let's say in a new market. Later on, for instance, here, you still have this insourcing of technology which is ready to go to the market. So this is about spinning, as let's say, inside out, right, or outside in open innovation, where you get technology from outside and you use it internally, or unused technology from which you developed internally is not used internally, but is used for other companies by licensing it out. So, but what we see here is basically an approach for a large company, because a large company has a lot of ideas, has an innovation funnel. A lot of these projects are moving, let's say, from research to development to introduction into the market. And so this is typically a big company approach, right? So if you look at the books of Henry Chesbrough, he has been working with Xerox, with Philips, with Siemens, with Google, with Procter & Gamble, so all large companies. Now, if we look at, so at the traditional open innovation perspective, it's very much technology driven, and so applicable to large technology advanced manufacturing companies. Later on, Henry has been writing a book on services and open innovation services, but it's still about big companies and it's still about technology. The focus is on the innovation funnel. It's about new product development. It's about how other partners can help you in internal development, internal product development, or how your own technology can be monetized by licensing out or by spinning off this technology. So this is what we learned so far from open innovation. But what I want to do is to open up the scope of open innovation and move to ecosystem management. So think, for instance, about open innovation when it's not related to new product development. Think, for instance, that you are part of a large company, a pharma company here in this case. You're not in the R&D department, but you are in the packaging department. Now, packaging has been for a long time just a cost center. You have to package medicines, and so there's a cost center and basically of no strategic value. Here, it's changing quite rapidly because packaging have an ID or other technology which makes sure that the packaging will tell you if the cold chain is preserved, or it can show how many pills are in the bottle. It can alert people that forget to take their pills to give them a warning that they have to take the pills in time. So packaging becomes basically a new value driver. And because of that, you can have a lot of interesting new applications and new value creation for customers through the packaging, not only through, let's say, the chemical composition of a medicine. Take, for instance, a service company. A lot of service companies don't have the technical expertise, yet they can deliver a lot of value for customers if, for instance, they can digitalize. And this has then to be developed by other companies. Similar, we have SMEs with insufficient technological expertise. You see that SMEs with few technological expertise have to rely on external technology partners to develop their own technology. But you also can apply it to social entrepreneurs, to NGOs, to government agencies who have a lot of technology, who need a lot of technology, but should not develop it itself. And the best example is NASA, where you have new technologies that may help you a lot in the mission as a space agency, but you rely on hundreds and hundreds of companies that develop these technologies. You even can apply it into commodity businesses. Assume that you are, for instance, the general manager of the crude oil business in Shell, or in BP. And so you only can sell commodities because you're selling crude oil. The question is, can open innovation help you in delivering or in leveraging your strategy? And the answer is yes, because, for instance, if you take the strategic leverage of, or if you take a strategic driver such as finding the best oil wells, this is based on knowledge, and the knowledge will not be developed by oil companies, but by specialized oil service companies or technology service companies like Schlumberger and others. So you see, that brings us to a different model. Let me see. That brings us to a different model where in the past we have new business development on the left side, and on the right side you have all strategic drivers that can be a reason to something went wrong. Sorry, can be a reason to develop open innovation, right? So it's not related only to new business development. Knowledge and so here in the past it was knowledge and technology focused. Nowadays it should not necessarily be focused on technology, but you can use other assets like brands, right? You can leverage brands of other companies. Who is playing with the design here? So please get rid of. So it also involves a network of partners, right? Here it was one-on-one. On the other side, it's a network of partners. It's you get new roles like an ecosystem orchestrator, an instigator, and an implementer. Here you have to manage individual relationships. Here you manage a set of relationships. And therefore, you see a whole range of new elements coming in, like new management processes of ecosystems, co-innovator risk and adoption risk, like it has been mentioned by Adner and Kapoor. Ecosystem competition is something new. Role of regulators and governments comes in, and the ecosystem dynamics, which is a very important thing, which we should look at it in detail. So all these new elements are elements that we have to take into account. Right, and that's something we're going to show in the next half an hour. I want to start with one example. I'm sorry that I go back in my slides. Let me close the door, please. So I give you an example of KLM, so of Sky Energy. Sky Energy is a small company owned by VCs and KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, which you all know. Now, what was the single purpose of this company? It's to develop, to create and accelerate the development of a market for sustainable jet fuel. You might have biodiesel in India, just like we have it in Europe, but biokerosene or sustainable jet fuel is not there yet because there was no demand, so there was no supply, there was no market. Now KLM, together with Air France, have been engaged, and they promised that they would reduce it 50% by 2050. Now to do this, and we still don't have electric airplanes. To do this, you have to introduce sustainable jet fuel, but to use sustainable jet fuel, you have to have, of course, supply. And to develop the supply, there have been orchestration of this supply chain is in the hands of Sky Energy. How does it look like? Well, forget about the big company. We're working with a small company here. And the small company is in the middle of an ecosystem. So the demand side here is with KLM. KLM has a value driver, a strong value as a customer, from a steady supply of sustainable and affordable biofuel. So that's the strategic driver for KLM and Air France and its friends. But in order to have that demand, in order to generate that demand, you need a supply. The supply doesn't exist yet, so Sky Energy is developing the whole value chain together with partners, and so it's setting up the aviation biofuel value chain, and it encourages the open innovation between these different partners. Of course, this is a very capital-intensive industry, so you need a lot of capital, you need a lot of investments. Therefore, you need to work together with the VCs, the venture capitalists, and you have to understand what means green kerosene. So the definition is defined by governmental good understanding together with the governments to understand what it means to have green kerosene. Okay, so it's an ecosystem of different partners where a small company is driving the whole thing. It can drive because it has an ecosystem, because it has the commitment from the demand side, which empowers it to set up the supply side. And because the supply side is a useful thing to have, you can engage the financial world, and you need, of course, the governmental agencies to make sure that your definition is right. So here we have a complete different setting. It's no longer a big company with a typical open innovation funnel, but it's an ecosystem. So the question is stream, which is very interesting and looks at ecosystem in a very specific way. I'm personally in digital technologies like machine vision, big data, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, augmented reality. Applied to agriculture, and I apply it to energy. So in precision farming, for instance, you see artificial intelligence, photonics, big data, Internet of Things, healthcare, same thing, energy, and maybe automotive, the same stuff, right? So I'm focusing on these specific areas. Why these sectors? Well, they are very important sectors in terms of the value they create. They have large value chains, inefficiencies for the moment. If you look at the inefficiencies that we have in agriculture, but also very much in healthcare. And nowadays, see in many, many countries, the inefficiencies through the COVID crisis. Data are crucial drivers for changes in this company, in these industries. And we see that, for instance, traceability, sustainability, prevention, the value creation. So data-driven activities become very prominent. And they are also important in terms of solving the global challenge, reliable and affordable healthcare, global warming. They're all related to these three industries, these four industries. Moreover, they have complex ecosystems, which involve multiple partners. And digital providers don't have the power to change the business processes. So that's something we're going to develop, or we're going to see, that the digital providers or the digital technology providers are not don't have that much power as we see, for instance, Amazon and Google and other digital giants. And so public authorities have a lot of power here, potentially have a lot of power, and they should be considered as partners, which is not the case in the traditional literature. So I promised you to focus on focus first on the theory, and Altner in 2017 has been defining it as an alignment structure of the multilateral set of partners that to interact in order for a focal value proposition to materialize. So here there are different elements that we have to consider. The first one is it's a construction, or it's a network to realize a focal value proposition. That means that all these partners, all these different companies, all these different organizations are working in the same direction, realizing a central value proposition. In healthcare, we will see an example for healthcare, and we will see an example for spraying in agriculture. However, to realize this focal value proposition, you see that you need a multiple set of partners. So that does not mean bilateral agreements, but really, so these different partners have to interact mutually. And finally, to get all this done, you need an alignment structure. So all these partners have different incentives. That means that they probably will try to get all different things from this collaboration, but you need to have compatible incentives to move forwards. If this is not the case, then you're never gonna realize this focal value proposition. So the central question in managing this ecosystem is to align the incentives. So the alignment structure is crucial. So in an ecosystem structure, you have the alignment of activities, actors, positions, and links. Now, very quickly, because I don't want to stay too long with the theory, what are the activities? So these are the actions to be undertaken to have in order the value proposition to materialize. So these are all the activities and different partners have to take. The actors or do's that they undertake these activities, there can be different actors, such as companies, small companies, universities, governments, regulators, you call it, right? Positions mean in an ecosystem, you have a position somewhere in the value chain, but also you have complementers, you may have knowledge networks, and so on. Links are very important. So links between the different partners will show how the transfer is done. And the transfer can be material, can be information, can be influence, can be funds, so it can be different things. Now, you can find this in the literature in Altner 2017 or in other papers that I have been mentioning. So I will not take too much time here. I will show you rather an example. How does an ecosystem look like in practice? So let's go to precision agriculture. I give you an example of Sarvio. Sarvio is let's say a farming brand name of Bayer. So Bayer launched the digital farming brand Sarvio late 2017. It encompasses all Bayer's digital farming solutions, and it currently has like 250,000 users, which are covering 60 countries. Now, I start a 3-minute a video of 3 minutes to understand how precision agriculture is working, and then we're going to dig into, let's say, the role of digitalization, the role of new business models, and the importance of setting up an ecosystem, and eventually the problems or the challenges to set it up. So I played the video. It's only 3 minutes. Keep in mind it's an advertisement, but at the other hand, it gives you a lot of information to give you in the 3 minutes as an overview of what digital farming can be.
Times can be tough when you depend on something as unpredictable as the weather. Every farmer can tell a story or two about Mother Nature. It's so easy to miss the right moment for protecting your crops from dangerous diseases such as fungal attacks. Wouldn't it be great to have proactive crop protection instead of reacting to infections as they appear? Now, meet your new partner in maintaining healthy crops, Sarvio Field Manager. Field Manager is a web-based decision support system that includes 3 key features to make it easier to do your job while increasing the efficiency of your operations. Field Monitor, all you ever wanted to know about your fields. Current biomass maps helps you identify issues early. High and low performing field zones based on 15 years of satellite data with Field Power Zone Maps. Field Zone Maps is a central hub to document and compare the success of all your crop production activities. Spray Timer processes all available data from your fields and uses tried and tested models to closely monitor the risk of specific diseases. It determines the right time for fungicide applications and gives you notice far enough in advance. The Zone Spray feature accurately determines the right dosage. Frequently updated satellite pictures are processed to derive current vegetation indices for your fields, making it possible to calculate the dosage for each zone individually. As a result, Zone Spray supplies you with field zone-specific maps for T2 applications that are ready to use on your terminal. More than just convenient, it also helps you make the most out of every drop of your fungicide. Achieve better treatments for your fields and field zones with Field Manager, the system that boosts efficiency and makes your job easier. All you ever wanted to know about your fields. Spray at the right time, use the right dosage. Because there's no accounting for the weather. Sarvio Field Manager, simply smarter crop production.
Okay, so we are back. If you would be a farmer, would you purchase our view? Well, the video shows, of course, the benefits. You have seen that. But there are also a number of challenges. Right? So let's have a look at the challenges. What are the examples here? So first, what is the value? So is there objective evidence? If you're a farmer, you want to have objective evidence of increased crop productivity. If that's not there, probably farmers will not accept it. What is the cost of using it? Right? This is a digital infrastructure, so it may be too expensive. Right? And who owns the data? What is Sarvia doing with my data as a farmer? Furthermore, farmers may be locked in because if you buy products from Sarvia or from Bayer, you can maybe not buy anything else from another producer. So once you are into that infrastructure, it's like an operating system. Once you work on an operating system, you may not be able to switch to another one. And what is the compatibility with all the database systems, right? So if you work with Bayer, can you work with BASF? Can you work with John Deere? Or this database is compatible or not? So other partners may help to deliver these solutions have similar challenges. So not only the farmers, but also like high-tech companies. So what you see already here, because of these problems with the farmers, ecosystem management is vital for the success of data-driven business models. So you have to manage that ecosystem. So Bayer or Sarvio or John Deere has to manage that ecosystem. So, and here in this case, Sarvio tries to lead that ecosystem for crop protection. So what I will do now in the next 20 minutes is to slice up, let's say, this ecosystem based on, or innovation ecosystem based on digital technologies. I'm going to try to slice it up into different elements to understand what is going wrong or how you have to manage it to make it right. So the first one is, do we have the right conceptual setting? Is an ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, is this the right conceptual frame when we look at digital technologies and disruptive business models? So we have, let's go back to Altner. Altner says it's the alignment structure of a multilateral set of partners that need to interact in order to create a focal value proposition. Do we have here a focal value proposition? Yes. Remember, it's about improving crop production, in reducing sprays and so on, reducing the use of sprays. And you need multiple partners. You need the farmers, you need the sprayers, the spray producers, you need the machine, the agriculture machine producers. You need high-tech companies that develop sensors and all this kind of stuff. So you have a multilateral set of partners. They do have to interact, right? And the alignment structure, I have already mentioned it. Farmers may have different incentives to adopt or non-adopt, to adopt or not to adopt this precision agriculture. Bayer has, of course, a complete different incentive to get involved in there compared to John Deere. So there's going to be a need for an alignment structure, an alignment of the different incentives. So let's have a look. So if we look at the focal value proposition, we're going to see an example of Philips Health Suite also. Multiple partners need to change their business models. Multiple partners need to interact. They have to align their incentives, which I mentioned already before. And the question is then, who is managing the alignment? So yes, probably we have the right framework. Now let's work it out, right, step by step. So what is a focal value proposition? We have seen it already for the agriculture, but we come back on that. So let's first focus on the Health Suite. Health Suite is a platform, a digital platform developed by Philips to integrate all the data on the health continuum. And a health continuum, we should consider it as data we can have from healthy living, from preventing to become sick, the diagnosing, the treatment once you're sick, recovery, maybe within the hospital or outside the hospital. And then finally, nowadays we have a lot of home care because a lot of things can be done at home, which originally could only be done, which previously only could be done, let's say, in hospitals or in polyclinics. So data nowadays are digitalized and you, in theory, can integrate. The problem is that all these data are captured or in a hospital or in a digital device which is not communicating with anything else. Or here you have your smartphone data or your smartwatch data, which are nowadays not yet used in prevention or diagnosing, but could be done that way. And so there's a lot to win if you could integrate this data. So this is not done yet, and Philips has that ambition to develop a platform where all this different data can be integrated. So big value for the whole healthcare system, but the question is will Philips be successful? So I give you another example where the focal value proposition, as we have it here in the Philips, the focal value proposition is basically, as a term, a non-trivial term, because you're working with different customers at the same time, and that may, so a focal value proposition, you will see that different people have a different target. So let's have a look, for instance, at an IVF digital device, which nowadays exists for measuring the follicle growth of ladies that want to, or women that want to be pregnant. And so you have to measure it every day. Previously, you had to go to the clinic every day to measure the follicles. Nowadays, you can do it on your own at home. So there's huge value for the patient. You have your privacy, you have the convenience of being at home. But for the gynecologist, it's a question mark. Gynecologists, at least in Belgium and most likely also in India, they were paid by visit. They're paid by consultation. And so each time, so this device is taking away a lot of daily consultations. And so there's a loss of income for the gynecologist. The same happens for the director of the IVF clinic because he sees less patients coming into the clinic, less visits to the clinic, so less income for the clinic. So, and another example is artificial intelligence in radiologists. Nowadays, and you may have heard that already on the news, artificial intelligence is nowadays more intelligent, if I can call it that way, than radiologists. It can find cancers, it can find breaks, fractures in bones, it can find, let's say, even COVID better and faster than the radiologists, right? So for the patient, it's a good thing because the accurate successes, or just number of successes in finding a disease is higher. The radiologist, that's a question mark. On the one hand, it can help him a lot. On the other hand, it requires changing his job. He has to be trained in new skills, digital skills. Procedures at the hospital, how to treat patients will change. The collaboration with the medical doctors and the role he plays with doctors will change too. So medical doctors in the hospital, they may have also a different look at it because it may be threatening for them, seeing that the analysis of the disease will be done by a machine together with the radiologist based on imaging, rather than on, let's say, a typical analysis, a typical medical inspection. Technical staff get new let's say, opportunities, but also different tasks to do. The legal department has a new problem because these are data, right? Digital data that have to be shared. And algorithm development requires, let's say, for the artificial intelligence, requires thousands of images that has to be processed before it can be operational. And that means that you need to share images across European hospitals, which then is again a legal problem, a regulatory problem, but also a problem of trust between different European hospitals. So you see, so the problem is, so if we come back, the value proposition itself is sometimes very difficult to understand. What does it mean to to have artificial intelligence in radiologists? What is the value proposition there? How far do you want to go? You don't know what the artificial intelligence finally going to be, finally going to mean in terms of radiology, and that also will depend on how you put it into a legal perspective. Let's go back to the starting point. So the business model changes. So in the focal value proposition in the precision agriculture. In the traditional crop spraying was very simple. So you have the farmer who's spraying the field, you have the pesticide, you have the spray machine, and it comes from John Deere, comes from Bayer. So basically you had three parties, market transactions between the three parties. You read the instructions, you just spray. This is a very much, let's say, market-based interaction between the different parties. But now you have a small company called Fauna Photonics, which is, by the way, a Danish company. It invented, let's say, sensors that transmit infrared invisible light to detect, let's say, automatically flying insects, and they do that. They can really tell which kind of beetles there are, like by using the wing beat frequency, the color, the wing to body ratio, and so on, right? And so it's an artificial intelligence system. So the system itself is training to capture, let's say, the insects better and better over time. So how does it work? So you have on the field automated data collection through the sensors. You have the machine learning, right, to analyze what kind of insects there are. You have the digital platform integration, because this data about insects has to be integrated onto GPS data, into time data. And then based on this digital platform integration, you have then the precision spraying. Precision spraying has the big advantage that you only spray for specific beetles, specific insects, in specific places where it's really necessary, and you leave other places of the field in touch. Now, with this system, you see a completely different business model. So you still have the pesticide, you still have a spray machine, and you still are spraying the field, so that's okay. Here you have the partners, potential partners, and then you have, let's say, what comes next, right? You have Fauna Photonics, which is using real-time insect data. You have the geo and time data. They all have to be integrated into the farm dating platform. And so then it comes to the farmer. So the farmer is not longer only buying pesticides, spraying machines, but is also buying information based on the data. And so this data, you see that there's kind of collaboration between the small companies and Bayer there. And you have some problems too. The first problem is, so you have a number of advantages, which we mentioned, but you have a number of challenges. So there's a lock-in effect for Fauna Photonics, because Fauna Photonics can do a lot with, can collaborate with Bayer or with Sarvio, but has a problem when it comes to working with John Deere or with other partners to use the same data eventually for even other purposes, not spraying-related purposes. But the data are owned by Bayer, and it's very difficult for a small company to use the same data, which is, by the way, very expensive to get to develop this data, to use the same data in other applications. So this is a kind of lock-in for Fauna Photonics. The database ownership, right, is a problem. The compatibility of this data with John Deere is a problem. And then you see a lock-in for the farmers, because once you work with Bayer, you cannot work with BASF. And since John Deere has the same strategy of developing a new platform, you see that John Deere is competing with Bayer. So John Deere will probably have its own spraying suppliers. And so it really generates a problem for the farmers. Okay, so the value proposition is one thing. And you see already that the value proposition is hindered by, realizing the value proposition is hindered by a number of challenges already. So let's go a little bit deeper. So digital platforms do play a role in that system. We have seen the central role of digital platform of Philips, but also in terms of the precision spraying. But then these platforms are not the same as the traditional platforms. Traditional platforms as we know, usually or connecting two-sided markets like Airbnb, Uber, or even a simple operating system. They are connecting supply and demand of software. You also see that in transactional platforms, transactions are simple and standardized. Right? Here, it's a multi-sided collaboration. It's much more difficult because, like in healthcare, you have wearables, apps, providers with different decision makers in the providers, insurance, home care, regulators, public policy makers. They are all related to this, right? Precision agriculture also includes farmers, machine manufacturers, chemical companies, and so on. So it's a multi-sided collaboration. It's way more complex than what we usually see in the B2C market. Transactions are non-standardized, and just for instance, compared to Uber or Airbnb and Tinder, you see that here we just go, for instance, for personalized services, like for instance in healthcare. Digitalized healthcare allows you, in theory, allows you to have personalized healthcare because it can bring together data which are specific for you, your DNA, your physical condition, your heart condition, and so on. So different ways of treating you may be related to the specific data that you have. So in the energy market, for instance, you see the situation is different house per house because I have an electric car, you don't have it. I have solar panels, you don't have it. I have different working hours than you have. Healthcare, here too, the trajectory for each patient is different, as I mentioned before. Yeah, I may be in a prevention phase. Somebody may be at the hospital. Somebody else is in home care. So, and in agriculture, you see the same thing. Each field or each cow is different and requires adapted, personalized approach. Maybe now you're laughing because you think, why would you differentiate a cow from another cow? Well, I can tell you that nowadays milk is analyzed of each cow in a way that it automatically generates like a prescription of how you should change the fodder for the cows, right? And in helping in this way to prevent diseases and so on. So a personalized approach requires data integration and close collaboration between the different players in the ecosystem, and that makes it relatively difficult. So digital platforms, yes, but don't confuse them with Uber and Airbnb. So these B2C platforms is very, very different. Second point is how to scale it. Remember that traditionally digital platforms can scale very fast. We have seen it with Airbnb, we have seen it with Uber, and it's because they don't have physical assets that basically they can do so. Here it's difficult. We see that the digital platforms in the three sectors are very slow to scale. Why is this? Well, because, for instance, in agriculture, if you want to implement a digital system, you have to do that farm per farm. In healthcare, you have to do that hospital per hospital. In energy, provider per provider or customer per customer. And that makes it difficult. That makes it even so difficult that venture capitalists are not very happy or not very eager to invest in this kind of technology because it's too slow to scale. And decision-making process is complex. For instance, a medical doctor, the one who may be benefiting directly from a digital solution, is usually not making the decision to buy these instruments. Financing may also be in the hands of somebody else. Right? So even though that people really can benefit from your invention or from your digital solutions, because the decision making is so complex, in a hospital, you will see that sometimes it will not be accepted. So regulation is also an issue because regulators are not taking a proactive stance in Europe. They have no long-term vision usually. And so you need this kind of long-term vision to introduce or to set the setting, let us say, to introduce digitalization. Also, medical doctors and energy providers, the digital, so they cannot implement digital services even when they want it because there are other hurdles within the hospital, for instance, financial hurdles, but also maybe other people opposing it. And so that makes it difficult to implement it. The question is, can we speed up this kind of scaling? And I would say, yes, if we can emulate variety. This is, for instance, possible in the customer community-related platforms, where you see that customers or community members are spreading the news of something valuable very quickly. And so in this way, you see an increased adoption of accelerated adoption. Here in B2B, it's more difficult, but you can do it. For instance, I see in the Netherlands, farmer associations playing a role, hospitals associations may play a role, collective energy purchasing groups may play a role, and so on and so on. So yes, you can do it, but you have to organize the demand side. And that's also an interesting point. So what we have seen in ecosystems so far is a producer or orchestration by producers. What I see here is an orchestration partially developed or partially stimulated by the demand side. Very important is that digital technologies only play a role, or only can play a role, if they can change the business processes in an existing business. I give you an example of digital glucose monitoring. It's a very simple example. It's a home care device. You can bring it home. If you're a diabetes patient, you have to measure it daily or even twice a day, I think. And what it does is simply measuring the glucose level in your blood. The values will be sent automatically through your smartphone to the medical doctor you have, and he will only invite you to come to his office if the values are abnormally high or low. So, what is the interesting point here? I have another example then. What is the important point here is that for the patient, it's very convenient to stay at home. He can stay at home. It's very accurate. It doesn't take time. He doesn't lose time to go to the doctor, and he saves a lot of money because he doesn't have to pay all these visits to the doctor. For the insurer, it's fine because that's a way of improving, let's say, the efficiency of monitoring. For the doctor, for the medical doctor, it's more difficult because he is losing income again, right? So that's one example. I give you another example, which is interesting because it has been part of research. It has been a research of a study. It's PREMOM, and PREMOM is pregnancy remote monitoring, and it's a project in Belgium. If you want to work on it, you have to have a look on it. You have to please look at the URL at the left bottom of this slide. What it does is it's looking at pregnant women with hypertension, and like 6 or 7% of the women do have hypertension, and it's a dangerous and complicated situation. So you better treat it the right way. So what is PREMOM as a project doing? Well, it started in 2014, with 5 Flemish, so Belgian hospitals for 4 years. So the objective was to reduce problems with hypertension among pregnant women. And the idea was to have telemonitoring going on. So a pregnant woman can take blood pressure, can monitor the blood pressure every day through a special app. The values are checked by a midwife at the hospital. If it's abnormal, she will inform the gynecologist, and then a pregnant woman can visit the hospital if necessary. She can always contact the gynecologist or the midwife when she has questions, and there is always a control group with no telemonitoring, so that's why we have this kind of results. What are the results of the project? Well, very interesting. They saw very few, much less prenatal admissions to the hospitals, less cases of hypertension. Newborns were average 10 days older at birth, and so less complications. fewer birth inductions, and cost reductions about 2,000 euros per delivery. So that was very interesting. Society as a whole is winning, right? Because the pregnant woman is more healthy, the babies are more healthy, less complications before, during, and after the delivery, so the birth, and so on and so on. So there's no second project going on. And then you would expect that this system or this invention would be rolling out automatically very fast all over Belgium and Europe maybe, but this is not the case, and I will explain why. Benefits for the patient are less complications, that's obvious, right? Less complication, less risk for the mom, more comfort, she stays at home. The baby is born 10 days later and more healthy, less birth inductions, and so on. For the government, it's also very clear there's a significant cost reduction and less healthcare costs afterwards, because
everything that is objective and is considered as desirable. And of course, there is also this notion that which is really interesting, is that it is ultimately a totalitarian nightmare, this society that is described here, but people voluntarily of scientific management by Taylor. And again, today we are experiencing this kind of rise of digital Taylorism, new public management, based again on the same ideas, where quantification and numbers only matter, individuality, and so on. And and of course, within this system, what is also very clear is that this kind of mathematization of life is a way towards the dehumanization. What is striking is that, of course, this kind of totalitarian potential of these surveillance technologies and this kind of mathematical ordering of life itself, recognized many times and by other scholars and so on. And for instance, Günther Anders in 1958 wrote a very nice essay called "The Obsolescence of Privacy," basically saying and arguing that technological devices that are intended to surveil society and order society and so on are already there is it is the feature of the technology, it is feature of the very logic. And I think that this novel and all these kinds of lines of thinking clearly show that there is a point to thinking about these technologies as deeply totalitarian in themselves. I can quote from Günther Anders, and I think this is a very interesting quote of COVID crisis, because broke this previously established distinction between the liberal West and this authoritarian Chinese government. Because suddenly it turned out that in order to be efficient, effective, we need to have the same technology. And I think this kind of feeds also well into this race towards AI and who's going to be the AI nation in the future. And you would have Putin saying that whoever will be the leader in AI will be the leader and the ruler of the world, and you have the Americans now competing with the Chinese and feeling as lacking in this AI race and so on. So this I think is interesting in itself. But to return to the quotes of Günther Anders, what he's saying that it makes no difference whether the hypothetical state A makes use of bugging devices because it is totalitarian, or whether the hypothetical state B becomes totalitarian because it uses such machine. The end result will be the same. If they use such machines without scruple, states A and B will soon start to look so much like twins that no one will be interested in knowing which was the former and which was the latter. And I think this is an insightful quote here, and we should not underestimate the inherent logic of these kind of technologies. And indeed, we see this desire for self-optimization everywhere these days. This desire to actually control our bodies through a technology, to monitor every single little detail of our lives, to in the workplace, to, you know, you're constantly getting these commercials on Facebook, or at least I am, to increase your productivity. Measure how much time you spend on answering emails, measure how much time you spend on this and that. And what does it do is that suddenly your whole life is kind of meant to be subsumed under the imperative of productivity, under the imperative of basically creating profit or generating profit for the other rather, but under the imperative of perfect submission, I would say. And again, this is the same technocratic logic that we see in governance, right? Where the idea is that, oh no, there is this household economy, there is this debt, you know, the countries cannot act as a sovereign currency issuing nations and states and so on. No, they have to submit to all these economic imperatives and so on. So you have this kind of logic of submission, which is there. And if you return to this Zamyatin's novel, I think it is very instructive to see how within a system that kind of, again, is the same system as is in the book, where you know, it has been perfectly calculated how much time you need to take care of your body, of your intellect, and even of your sexual needs. So within the book, you get a little pink coupon, and there you have your 15 minutes to engage in sexual intercourse, and preferably also people share other people, the people are assigned to other people, and so on. Why is that? It is so that human emotion, so that love, for instance, cannot emerge within such a system. But objectively, all your needs are met. Objectively, there is kind of harmony and so on. And this is interesting. So basically, you turn sex into a sort of commodity, which cannot result in arousal of any kind of deeper passions, right? So you control all matters of life in this way. And what is interesting about this novel, I would say, is that people, and I think this is far more realistic portrayal of a totalitarian society, is that people voluntarily accept it. There is no repression. So there are some resistance forces, and the media openly reports on these resistance forces. For instance, they don't try to hide the fact that there is resistance. And I think this is very interesting, because again, I think we can draw a parallel to the way that neoliberalism has been and capitalism has been very efficient at integrating any form of resistance, any form of critique, and basically turning it into some kind of profit, even, because you know, you can make nice Marx t-shirts and so on. so you kind of can accept that there is resistance. Now, what is very different between the reality, between the novel and this reality of totalitarianism and this kind of voluntary submission there, and the kind of more or less voluntary, involuntary submission these days, is that the people there are satisfied when it comes to social security, when it comes to having food, enough food, when it comes to you know, all basic needs are basically satisfied. So there is no reason for complaint. Now, within the current system, what is interesting, there are many reasons for complaint. So you have a rising inequality, you have a lot of disillusionment, you have lots of poverty, you have other forms of oppression, and so on. So there are plenty of reasons to rebel, and yet we voluntarily submit to a system and reproduce it. Now, I've been really thinking about this for a while. Why is it so? Why is it that we are so willing to submit to a system that is detrimental for us? And I think, again, this has to be taught in context of this kind of technocratic logic which dominates, and this kind of pragmaticism and instrumentalism, which is kind of embodied in those technologies that are increasingly governing our life, right? So we are told, what are we told about this kind of data again? We are told that data are beautiful, that they are hard, which is really interesting, because you cannot you have to emphasize also this hardness of this data. It cannot be anything that is soft and critical and contextual is basically uninteresting within this logic. We are told that the data is pure, that is objective, neutral, emotion free, and rational. And of course this also means that if we build our life around this kind of data-driven solutions, then it will be in a similar fashion, harmonical and so on. And this is really interesting because this kind of ambition for truth is really fascinating. So in just recently, when the COVID crisis started, the UK government wrote on its website that they hired Palantir, the very notorious tech company owned by Peter Thiel, that is engaged in all kind of military and security and CIA contracts, to deliver the COVID-19 analysis for the UK government. And they remarked, and I quote, "Disparate data is to be integrated, cleaned, and harmonized in order to develop the single source of truth that will support decision making." So this is a very particular logic where you really believe that by putting all these data together, you will create a single source of truth. I mean, this kind of rhetoric is nothing but totalitarian, I'm afraid, and this is exactly what is kind of being sold as the solution. And again, every time a system that is data-driven fails, we are told that, oh, it's just we didn't have enough data, right? So the only problem that we have is that we need more data, and once we have more data, it will work better, and then it will be truly truthful and so on. And what is really fascinating here, that is that this kind of data is equaled with knowledge and results in a kind of very naive neo-positivism, right? Very, very naive and vulgar positivism, where you really believe that the data is raw somehow, that it is pure, that it is only a matter of crunching it somewhere. And of course, then the question is, but do people really believe that? Right? This is the image that we are sold. But when you look at kind of critical algorithm studies and so on, we know that the data is not raw. The data is very often very biased already. The data is dirty if it is hardly pure, and it cannot be, but there is this idea that it can be kind of purified by the machine, that when you put it in the machine, it's like this magic thing that can purify it. And then we can worship the results somehow. So there is also, I would say, a religious undertone to this kind of veneration of data and big data. So but of course, so what does critical algorithm studies tell us, right? They tell us that of course these biases can be baked into the data. You can say that and that for instance, in policing, it creates a kind of, I've been looking a lot on predictive policing and these kind of hotspot technologies, also individual profiling and so on. What it does, it basically creates a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Once the system figures out that a certain area in your city is more prone to crime, it will send more police there. The police is far more likely to stop and search somebody. Their risk score increases, and so on. And you can have this kind of self-fulfilling loop in which a lot of innocent people can get very easily trapped and stigmatized and so on. Of course, the same kind of predictions you would that are kind of detrimental you would have in all kinds of hiring softwares. So if a lot of companies are trying to use AI for hiring, and in that case, you would say that let's take the most successful people in our company, run their CVs, their behavior, their dress, their even their way of speaking, for instance, through this feed it to this AI. And then once you get these applications that are also recording their video and CV and so on, we compare those. Basically, the system does is that it kind of distills the crucial features, and then based on those, it kind of tries to determine the likelihood of success of the person that is going to or that is applying for the job. What happens is that if you have a company, very simply, very easily said, if you have a company that has a lot of white male business leaders that are fancily dressed and so on, and educated in certain institutions, the software will automatically suggest that a black woman is not to be invited for an interview, for instance, because she's obviously not the face of success within that company. And this kind of prejudice is very easily explained, is again built into all forms of these systems. So, and of course, this also, and this is again sold under the label of objectivity, right? So all these systems will be again sold under the idea that we erase the human emotion. The human emotion is the problem. The human irrationality is the problem, and so on. And we produce an objective algorithmic kind of result that will show us completely unbiased result. And again, as in this example shows, it is not unbiased. To the contrary, it builds in this kind of bias. And the same you would have in this kind of court systems in the US, where you, for instance, evaluate if a person should be given bail or not, if they are likely to reoffend, and so on. Again, you have the same kind of biases built in. And but this is, of course, not all. It's like this is what happens is that, again, as I'm saying, we know all these things, and we also know, for instance, and I think this is one interesting point, is that people might here object that I can compare this to a totalitarianism, whatever, and but it's a collectivist idea, and yes, where the individual is erased, but they would argue that, well, in our society, the individual is very much valued, right? It's like everything is personalized, everything is individualized, everything is adjusted to who you are, or so we are told. And but is this really the case? The case is, for instance, in this wonderful novel, again, is that everybody is indeed individualized, but they are still not being individuals, for that matter, right? So they are not allowed to be individuals. And are we so different? I'm thinking, because what does these systems do when they personalize for you? They put you into a category together with other people who acted like you, right? And they put you into a statistical bracket that says a person like you is interested in a similar book, so hence you might be too. This is not personalization. They don't care anything about who you are. They care about putting you into a certain category. And this is I think the crucial problem that people kind of oversee and are kind of not seeing the effects of being put into categories and into boxes and kind of forced into them without your own without you having anything to do with it. So and what does it basically do? It looks at patterns of your interaction and compares it to patterns of interactions with other people. Now, the most brilliant example and the most disturbing probably is the use of signature strikes in the US drone warfare. So under Obama and now under Trump, you have an excessive use of signature strikes to target terrorists in diverse places: Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, you name it. Well, how do these kind of technologies operate? Well, in the old days, you would have targeted strikes, where you would have the intelligence agency trying to figure out who these people are. Like, they cared who the individual is. Is the individual, what is his name? Is he a terrorist? Should we target him, and so on? But now you have these signature strikes, and it's been going on for quite a while, and it's been brought up by many human rights advocates, so this is nothing new I'm saying here. But these signature strikes operate based on patterns. So let's say the agency identifies a certain courier or something working for some terrorist organization. They monitor his metadata from the telephone, and based on this kind of metadata, they distinguish a certain pattern of activity. Now, this pattern of activity is compared to the patterns of activity of all the other people in a certain area, who are all potential terrorists. So you have this pattern that is then compared to other patterns. And well, if your pattern happens to be very similar to the pattern of the activity of a terrorist, then you might be in for a problem, and you might be a civilian target and be hit by this and may die even. So this is what basically happens when you are reduced to a pattern of activity. So you are not considered an individual. Nobody checks if you're an individual. You're reduced to a pattern, to a statistical number. And again, this is the same logic that we see in for instance, when you're evaluated by a bank, if you should be given a bank loan, right? Today you do it on the internet. You fill out some form, you fill out some kind of details about yourself and so on. And well, what does the bank do? The bank runs it through some algorithm which is trained based on the data of its own customers, and it basically decides if you are worthy of a loan or if you should be dismissed. The fine thing is that you will never know. So I spoke to some bank in Norway about people working on AI in a bank in Norway. They're like, "Oh, we can't explain it." So within one bank you might get a loan because it has different sort of customers and different pattern. But within another you might not. So nobody anymore cares to give you trust and individual treatment. This is the precise opposite of the individual. So again, I think we're far more there where we reduce people to categories which we don't even know what are. So when for instance, there's this nice way of AI thinking, I think, is when you keep searching on the internet and the AI constantly, these kind of search engines, they try to figure out who you are. Are you likely to be a woman, or are you likely to be a man, based on the searches and so on. So one day you can be like 75% woman, the other day you can be 25% men. Very often, if you search a lot of academic articles, you're far more likely to be a man and so on. But this I think is a completely different way of categorizing and thinking about what is human, and in that sense, the individuality is actually not recognized the same way that if you are given a risk score based on your previous activity, it has nothing to do with you as a person, right? It has to do again with being put into a box with some other people with similar features, be it that you're black, or be it that you come from a certain neighborhood, or and many other probable features. If you like, I don't know, if you have been shopping at a certain place and so on. So you have this, and I think for what is again, I think you need to return to this a bit, is what is fascinating is that we all kind of know it, and I think as academics we know it even better. If you think of, and I've been thinking about this, how this kind of system is sustained on the ideological level, because one thing is that we know that these injustices exist. This is nothing. This is no new information. The governments know that these kind of perverse effects of these technologies exist. And you could argue, like, well, there is this profit and there is this power of these tech corporations and so on. But I am thinking, well, this is all fair and true. But, we are very many people who are aware. And if we would want, maybe we could do something. But this is actually not happening, right? And we see it very well in academia, I think. If I turn to our own, I've been looking into, interviewing people working in trade unions and academics. And, in academia, we have seen the rise of the same systems of management, at least this kind of quantified numerical systems, ranking of universities, ranking of scholars, your age index, and all these kind of impact numbers. And what do they say? They don't say anything about the content, about the quality of an article, about the quality of a scholar. You could argue that a scholar may publish one book a life, which is amazing. It should be enough. But no, we have to produce an enormous quantity, but we care very little about the quality. And as qualitative scientists, we also know that all this data that goes into it is very bizarre, right? It's how it is selected, what is selected as important is basically an ideological process in itself, right? And then we see that there are these kind of perverse effects that the system creates, that giving all these instrumental incentives. You must publish in a journal, which is like in the UK, this kind of 4-level system where you must publish in the journal with 4 stars and not in the journal with 1 star, and so on. Because if you publish in 4-star, you're far more likely to get a promotion. But publishing in a journal with 4-star also very often means that you have to tailor your own research to that particular journal, which accepts only a particular ideological line of thought, very often kind of liberal, centrist, and so on. You would see that very few journals that are critical would be ranked as 4. Those are very often ranked as 1, and so on. So if you're critical, we're sorry for you, you won't be promoted. So what people do is very often that they just embrace the system and say, well, I have to feed my children, I'm being instrumental here, I'm being pragmatic, so I will adjust my research to what is being demanded, right? And we constantly do it. We do it when we apply for grants. Like, there is this enormously widespread cynicism where you keep saying, well, they want me to have impact before I even know what I will find, so I will write a whole 2 pages about impact. And it's like, the true research would be that which doesn't know what it finds. But you're supposed to know what you find, because somebody has to tick all those boxes and so on. So you have this knowledge about the skewing, the gaming of these rankings, the way universities try to kind of increase their all kinds of performance measurements and so on. You have this proliferation of managers at universities, which nobody likes, at least among the academics, but still nothing changes. It's getting worse and worse, right? And what is interesting, that you find a deeply cynical attitude among academics. Absolutely no. And what is cynical attitude? Cynical attitude is where you say, like, well, I know that this system is unjust. It's the performance measurements are just bullshit, really. It doesn't tell anything about the quality. It doesn't measure anything of substantial value. It basically goes against the ethos of the university. But in order to kind of survive, I still play the game. Right? So what happens is that you get this kind of cynical individual that feels internally above the system. He knows that the system is critical, is enlightened. So you have this kind of enlightened false consciousness, right? Where with what Sloterdijk would call that, or a cynical ideology subject of what Zizek would call. And of course, in their practice, they do exactly what the system demands. And this is the interesting thing, that unlike, for instance, the people in Zamyatin's novel who were voluntarily submissive because they kind of saw the benefits of the system and accepted it and believed in it, we submit despite our knowledge. We submit ourselves, even when we don't believe in the system, we submit ourselves to it. And what is particular about the cynical attitude is that it is cynical about everything. It is cynical about the managers as much as it is cynical about any possibility of change. And I think that leads to this kind of capitalist realism where we can't imagine an alternative to the system because we are equally cynical about the system as we are about any possibility of resistance. That's why I think you see very often that when you question academics, at least in Norway, and maybe I can't speak for India, but they see very little value in trade unions, for instance. Yeah, it's good to negotiate your individual salary and so on, and we are happy that we have some kind of working conditions and they are doing that job, but they don't feel like they want to engage with them. They don't feel like, they kind of pay their monthly thing to delegate the kind of idealism to the trade union. So you see, again, you kind of, there's this logic of constantly delegating. You delegate judgment to the automatic system, you delegate measuring quality to an automated system, you even delegate your political beliefs to a trade union, which is equally cynical about the changing of the system. So it just performs its function more or less okay, but it doesn't really believe in any kind of structural change. So you're kind of trapped in this ideology of cynicism, which is deeply apolitical, right? It doesn't produce any positive or negative or whatever change. And again, this kind of, and this is really, I think, this, when this kind of technocratic logic meets the logic of cynicism, you are really a kind of subject fully, because you have actually in your everyday practice, you embrace this kind of technocracy, yeah, and this is what you perform. You're being pragmatic, you're being instrumental, and so on, even if you internally resist. And then you can pride yourself even on like knowing better, right? And then we see the same kind of pattern of kind of disavowal of knowledge in all areas these days, right? It's like, I think that the cynical ideology is the ideology of neoliberalism in a way, and the way it reproduces itself. So you know very well that, you know, your clothes are produced under bad conditions in some factories in Bangladesh or India or other places, but you know, but you feel good that you know it, but you still continue to consume it, and you wouldn't do anything about it because you don't really believe that you can do anything, right? And why don't you believe that? I think it's because you feel so individualized, but not like an individual, but individualized, that you don't find you don't see collectivity as a kind of positive solution, that you could do something with other people. And the only movements that you see emerging are these kind of Twitter movements, right? It's like we protest a symbolic thing on Twitter, and that's great, and we've changed something. We remove some symbols, we change some logos, we change the visual landscape, but the real suffering, the real injustice is not really moving us. And this I think is really interesting, and I wonder if it has again a connection to this kind of digital systems that, you know, they really manage very successfully this kind of rational mathematical quantification logic to really distance you from yourself and from your humanity. So and of course, what is even more troubling, I think, within all these kind of, and I think this will be my kind of last point, within these kind of systems that we're seeing emerging, is that the value of kind of qualitative knowledge, of critique of humanities is not valued anymore, right? It's not seen as a value. It's seen as a problem. When you go for a training for how to succeed in the European Research Council grants and the Horizon EU program for funding, you are told that you are the problem as a critical researcher because you don't think like an entrepreneur. Because you know, if you would think more like an entrepreneur, then you would succeed. You know, this is your problem. So the problem is your mindset, right? And that needs to be changed, and then you can succeed within the system. And I think this is, and you know, at the same time as we see the dominance of this kind of logic, we see that, at least in Europe, I'm experiencing this very very personally, the amount of funding